Hello, everyone, and welcome to the co-creation workshop. Before we begin, I want to inform you that this workshop will be recorded and published publicly online. By participating in this workshop, you consent to being recorded and having your image, voice, and any chat messages shared in the public domain. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and consider changing your display name and then using the chat feature to communicate anonymously. Alternatively, you can choose to leave the workshop now and use the recording later. The recording of this workshop will be accessible to the public so they can also learn what you will be learning during the workshop. This way, we use the university resources to increase the public's access to knowledge. Your consent to media release will be greatly appreciated. We encourage you to keep your cameras on and your mics on when you want to speak, so we can have better engagement, but it is ultimately your call. Please take a moment to adjust your settings if necessary. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. So I'm going to provide now a description of the workshop. We live in unprecedented times when tech-created filter bubbles deepen the perpetuating forces of polarizing politics and ideologies that infiltrate daily lives to reinforce the singularity of truths and ideological isolations, and therefore sustaining the systemic power structures of disenfranchisement. In order to reimagine social paradigms and redesign systems, there is a fundamental need to redefine processes so that they become the embodiment of the changes envisioned. Processes are not simply neutral paths, but the manifestation of the social and political forces that can perpetuate inequities and amplify the same social constructs that we aim to change. In this workshop, Rasheen Fahandej will discuss her multi-year community co-creation initiatives and her institutional pedagogy and the role of media, technology, and community co-creation to create new social structures that make visible unconventional forms of solidarity and criticality across differences. She will discuss community co-creation as a central methodology to democratize access to technology and storytelling to shift the traditional power dynamics toward equity and justice. I'm going to provide also a bio of Rasheen Fahandej. Rasheen Fahandej is an Iranian-American immersive filmmaker, futurist, and cultural activist. Her projects center on marginalized voices and the role of media, technology, and public collaboration in generating social change. A propagator of, quote, art as ecosystem, she defines her projects as a, quote, poetic cyber movement for social justice. She cultivates processes that democratize access to technology and storytelling, using community co-creation as a central methodology to shift the traditional power dynamics toward equity and justice. Fahandej is the founder of A Father's Lullaby, a multifaceted immersive media initiative that interrogates racial bias and structural racism in the criminal justice system. She has founded Future Inclusion Lab in partnership with 01 and the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, an experimental virtual laboratory for collective imagination of our social systems centered on art, emerging technology, and community co-creation. Fahandej's projects have been awarded and exhibited internationally. Fahandej is a senior co-creation research practitioner at MIT Open Documentary Lab and an assistant professor of emerging and interactive media at Emerson College, where she has launched a pioneering pedagogy that brings together students with formerly incarcerated fathers, probation officers, and their children to co-create personal documentary projects that speak to the social change of mass incarceration using AR, VR, and 360-degree technology. Please welcome Rasheen Fahandash.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome. I'm delighted to share this space with you all who are participating in our live session or watching the video recording online. Thank you, Professor Nasiri, for your kind invitation. You were provided with a description of the workshop. Our collective journey during this workshop is a combination of group activities, lecture, project examples, and a hands-on exercise focused on your own project. Keep in mind that I will switch between multiple platforms during our workshop, including Google Slide, Menti, and Miro board. We will start the session with a thought experiment as a prologue to our activities. After that, I will share with you the agenda for the workshop. I'm going to switch to presentation mode now with the title of our workshop, Co-creating Ecosystems of Care with Communities, Media, and Technology Towards Systemic Change. Many of you might be familiar with Menti platform. We are going to use Word Cloud. This is the QR code that I would like you to scan with your phone. It will take you directly to menti.com so you can submit your response to the following question. If there is any issues with connection, please let me know. So the question is, what is the first image that comes to your mind when you hear the word Iran? For those of you who are watching the workshop recording, pause here and consider your answers before watching the group response. Your responses are anonymous, this space is non-judgmental, and there is absolutely no wrong answer. I am looking for your unfiltered response. I'm going to read out loud your responses as you are submitting them. So your words are country, war, flag, soccer, conflict, Middle East, war-torn, protests, oil, desert, community, and a strength. As you know, the word clouds, the most popular answers would appear larger. So the Middle East, country, and war are the words that appear larger in this space, meaning that more people have responded with those vocabularies. Thank you for participating. So the next question to you is, what is the source of this information, where this image is coming from? And please use the chat this time to submit your responses. I'm going to read them out as you're submitting them. So we have in the chat news, media, news, internet, social media, news, social media, internet, news, television network, mass media, internet, social media, news. Thank you, everyone. So the last question is, how do you define this information? When you look at our word collage here, what would you say the information? Is it nuanced? Is it a stereotypical or surface level? Are we telling a single story, or is there multiplicity and complexity of narratives? Again, use the chat, please, to write a response. Also, feel free to unmute yourself and speak. I'm going to read the chat responses. Surface level, not nuanced at all. Singular, negative depiction. US perspective. US Western perspective. Not everything is negative. Vague information based on various images and various information. So let's reflect for a moment on this exercise. If anyone is to ask you about Iran, the images that comes to your mind are generally the realities that you know of that country and its people. It is the knowledge that you carry as the truth, the reality. In this reflective moment, however, you described your collective shared knowledge as not nuanced, US Western perspective, and in a way stereotypical. You have identified the sources of your knowledge mainly to be news and media content, whether on TV or internet. I would like to share with you a quote from the writer and novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie about the danger of a single story. The single story creates stereotypes. The problem with the stereotype is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. I've been doing this exercise in my classrooms with my students for many years now. The only times students are able to provide more nuanced information, images, and vocabulary is when they had a personal encounter, an intimate information. For example, they knew somebody from Iran, or they have met someone personally, or they had a close friend or a distant relative. They were enabled with more complete images and more nuance, complexity in their story. Stories that moves beyond the single story of the other. So let's consider this an intimate knowledge versus a distant knowledge. Perspectives that they are enabled to move beyond the stereotypical and often media-driven representations of people and places. Now, one of the main questions that I want you to have in mind throughout our engagement is what are some of the ways and methodologies that we can be enabled to expand our knowledge, our truth, and our perspective beyond a single story to nuanced narrative, intimate narratives with more complete knowledge of communities, people, and places. Here, I would like to share a short video from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is from the same TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. And it speaks about the power and relationship of the power to the single story.
So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story. I recently spoke at a university where a student told me that it was such a shame that Nigerian men were physical abusers like the father character in my novel. I told him that I had just read a novel called American Psycho, and that it was such a shame that young Americans were serial murderers. Now, Now, obviously, I said this in a fit of mild irritation, but it would never have occurred to me to think that just because I had read a novel in which a character was a serial killer, that he was somehow representative of all Americans. And now, this is not because I'm a better person than that student, but because of America's cultural and economic power, I had many stories of America. I had read Tyler and Updike and Steinbeck and Gateskill. I did not have a single story of America.
And here are landing questions for our prologue, that they are the central key questions that we would carry with us throughout the workshop. In a world where systemic social, political forces perpetually reinforce polarization and divisive representations of social groups and communities, how our methodologies and tools can be reimagined for creating alternative spaces of care and criticality across territories of differences. How can we co-create ecosystems with communities, media, and technology towards systemic change? I invite you to keep in mind these questions throughout our collective knowledge building together tonight. I'm going to move to an overview of our agenda. We started our session with a group activity together, reflective exercise. In section 1, I will introduce the concept of art as ecosystem that I have developed as a philosophy and a theory of change. Section 2 is an introduction to media co-creation, why and how, and I do that through the lens of collective wisdom, which is a key resource in this field. We continue this section with a group activity in breakout rooms to review the collective wisdom's 10 principles for co-creation as it relates to your own project. Moving from theory to practice in section 3, I will share my multi-year project, A Father's Lullaby, as a case study and explain the purpose of art as ecosystem as it applies to the process and community co-creation as an integral method in this project. Section 4 is a hands-on activity focused on your project, where you will map out your project's ecosystem based on knowledge and power. This is an opportunity for you to bring these critical concepts and questions that we are speaking together and refine that through your own project. Section 5 includes co-creation best practices, lessons learned from the field, and the importance of community agreements. I also have extended resources and links for you that I will share in that section. Keep in mind, please, that we have a very limited time together, so this workshop is meant as an introduction. I'm offering you a wide range of concepts and method and resources. In the companion guideline, I will provide you with additional, with all of these links. So I would encourage you and invite you to explore on your own pace for deeper understanding. Section 1, Art as Ecosystem. In order to address social justice challenges with their intersectional complexity through the creative process, I have come to define a new form of artistic practice I call art as ecosystem. A network of cross-institutional collaborations with multiplicity of narratives that investigates social systems and animates public site and online platforms. Considering the entire ecosystem of our humanity on a hyper-local level, in dialogue with public site, simultaneously expand and connect communities beyond physical boundaries through virtual commons and synthetic words. Art as ecosystem acknowledges that in order to reimagine social paradigms and redesign systems, there is a fundamental need to redefine our processes so that they become the embodiment of the changes we envision. Processes are not simply neutral paths, but the manifestation of the social and political forces that can perpetuate inequities and amplify the same social construct that we aim to change. Emerging technology and co-creation process are tools and frameworks to create alternative communities, disrupt traditional power dynamics, and promote cross-sector collaborations, centering on the transformative power of personal stories. In this act of storytelling, the personal political realities of race, gender, immigration, class, and climate justice are intersectional. From this place of interwoven, holistic narrative, art as ecosystem arises. This is an image that I will come back to several times during this workshop. This is the pillar of my co-creation practice. I utilize immersive technology and design co-creative processes to create alternative communities. Our philosophies are based on collective care, poetic justice, and power of individuals' direct action towards systemic change. The community we build is at the heart of this triangle, and the creative process provides the intimate and powerful opportunity to collectively act and shift the dominant narratives around urgent social challenges. I would like to just briefly, in a few sentences, give you some of the rationale behind these tools. Community co-creation centers the lived experiences of community members as expertise in order to shift the traditional power dynamics in traditional media production. Emerging technologies offering the new language that expand our train of storytelling for future imagination and speculative design. Immersive experiences, both physical and virtual, act as a third space that enable intimate encounters across the territories of differences and cultivate critical inquiries. The immersive embodied spaces also provide audiences and witness an intimate contemplative place for redefining our definition of self and others. These topics might feel abstract at the moment, but becomes more tangible through the deeper case study of my project, A Father's Lullaby, in the following sections. So what is media co-creation? Co-creation is a complex concept, and it has been defined in many different ways. Some might use it interchangeably with collaboration, participation, or co-design. There are also many examples of the word being co-opted for something that is actually not in any form co-creation. In section 2, I would like to dive deeper to define co-creation, why and how, using a key resource in the field published in 2019. It's called Collective Wisdom. It is a landmark field study authored by Katerina Sisak and William Uricchio. It is also co-authored, as you see, by many other practitioners in the field. I referenced the online platform, which is publicly available, an interactive report. The book of Collective Wisdom was published last year by MIT Press. Collective Wisdom brings together knowledge from conversations with 166 participants, practitioners and scholars, and 251 media projects that highlights trends, opportunities, risks, and challenges to help advance the understanding of creative efforts outside of the limit of singular authorship. Based on these conversations, they define co-creation, I quote, "Co-creation offers alternative to single author vision and involves a constellation of media production methods, frameworks, and feedback systems. In co-creation, projects emerge from a process and evolve from within the communities and with people rather than for and about them." This is central to this definition. Co-creation spans across and beyond discipline and organizations. And what I consider at the heart of this definition is the ethic toward equity and justice. The concept of co-creation reframes the ethics of who creates, how, and why, and interpret the world and seek to change it through the lens of equity and justice. There are many references and diagrams and resources in the field study that it would be an amazing resource for you. Here I would reference a few of those resources. Co-creation resides on a spectrum. If you consider different models of media production, on one end of the spectrum is the author, the authorship and the single authorship. And for example, in films, the film reflects the director's artistic vision. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the PR, advertising, and propaganda, where media maker is at the service of the partner. This diagram rightly shows the co-creation at the central space of equal shared discovery process. What is important and what is beautiful about this diagram is that really looking at this as a spectrum. And co-creative process itself can be defined and designed differently throughout different stages of the project, especially in long-term and ongoing projects. For example, in my work, I design different co-creation models based on the project's different stages of life, and my rationale generally and primarily is centered on the needs and capacity of community members and co-creators. This is a beautiful interactive graphic that situates co-creation within an ecosystem of practices. There has been rich histories in other fields where many people have been working on methodologies that seek to shift the power dynamics in the process, and they have been instrumental and key in cultural production and knowledge building. This graph puts these methods in conversation with each other as part of an overall effort to help break down the silos. It is also a wonderful resource to think about co-creation as a form of cross-disciplinary project. So you can be looking at different disciplines that they can enhance and expand your ongoing work. So let's look at some of the rationale behind why co-create and why now. I will read just a few of them. Co-creation confronts power systems that perpetuate inequality and offer alternative, open, equitable, and just models of decision-making that is rooted in social movements. Co-creation can help tackle complex problems, especially climate crisis. Co-creation deals with time differently. And finally, co-creation is part of the ecosystem that can redefine concept of public good, civic trust, and commons, including our public spaces, cities, platforms, and narratives. Again, consider these as resources that you can use as guiding light. Next, I want to take you through the 4 types of co-creation that it's identified in the field study. And I would present one project, very brief overview. Feel free to dive deeper on your own. There are many examples of projects in the collective wisdom. Co-creation within communities in person. This is Kipu project. This project is a hybrid interactive online documentary, participatory oral history project. Kipu seeks to create collective memory and help achieve justice for nearly 300,000 women and thousands of men who were the subject of brutal sterilization program under the Peruvian president in 1990s. This project's name and design and inspirations come from the ancient Inca system Kipu, a system of colorful knotted strings used to keep official records and tell stories. This is the interface where you access the project. The next category is co-creation online and with emergent media. This project is Fireflies VR. It's one of the world's first participatory virtual reality project. It's co-creation with Brownsville Criminal Justice Center. It's a VR game basically that players from both sides of the conflict work together to explore histories and dreams of community and its residents, searching for their commonalities amongst the conflicts. The partners on the projects are Brownsville Community Justice Center and People's Culture Collective. They established the Brownsville Tech Lab as a permanent site and program to train youths in game design, coding, and other craft of media making. Next category is co-creation across disciplines and beyond. Eviction Lab is an ongoing co-created transdisciplinary project that draws on the collective expertise of sociologists, statisticians, economics, journalists, web engineer, community members who were all engaged in documenting the rising crisis of eviction across America in real time. And the fourth and last category is co-creation between humans and non-human systems. Seok-Won Chung is a pioneer in the realm of human-machine collaboration. She's a Chinese-Canadian artist and researcher and has been long exploring mark made by hand and mark made by machine to delve into dynamics between human AI system and robotics. So next we will look at the principles for co-creation. We'll do that as a group activity in the breakout rooms. You have about 10 minutes. This would be an opportunity for you for intimate discussion with the small groups of your team. I would like you to look at these principles. There are 10 principles for co-creation that it was developed through these many conversations in collective wisdom. I would like to know what are the ones that you would connect with, also what are your learning and takeaways, and how this reflective moment can help you reiterate your project. I want to emphasize that co-creation process is an iterative and reflective process. It's very important that you and your co-creators set time and space for discussions and conversation that can be insightful in changing the next phase of your project. When you go into the breakout room, I will move a bit in between rooms in order to have a conversation with each team. I will call you about a minute before the breakout rooms are closed. Enjoy your conversation, and I'll see you there. It was wonderful to engage with some of the teams and have the conversations. We will use the next few minutes to share some of your takeaways and reflections on questions that you might have. Do we have any volunteers?
I can share.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, hi. We spoke about 3 of the principles. We spoke about 2, 3 and 6. I can talk about 2 because that's the one I brought up. I think we made some documentaries in class, and it became very apparent to me quite quickly that because we were trying to come up with a single goal, a single storyline, and we were very outcome driven in the production of our films, and being very intentional with the effect we wanted to create, it did distort the meaning. And I think if you take that into a broader, filmmaking and media creation in general, co-creation and sort of finding meaning in the process of media creation is really important, because if you do have a single purpose or a single outcome that you're trying to create, obviously it's going to skew the impact and meaning of your media.
Thank you, Charles, for this very honest response and reflection on your process. What I want to share from my own experience is that creative process is such a powerful and intimate space, and there is a power in itself when it's shared with the community, and how it can really create new form of social structures when we bring people from very diverse background and histories together. The other point here also, as you mentioned, is that we live in a capitalist society that time is money and product is important. So we might not knowingly already taking these philosophies and ideologies and put them into practice, which sacrifice a lot of things that we now are questioning in terms of equity, justice, and community. So it is important to be mindful that when we start thinking about building communities in the process, it shifts the time, and we have to look at the time in a different way. We have to look at our commitments in a different way. So thank you. Anybody else would like to share?
Yeah. Yeah, so our group, we're doing a project on the Screen Actors Guild and like SAG-AFTRA. So we talked about mostly that a lot of the union history was all started by like white men. So our emphasis on like trying to get not only like just like actors' perspectives, but like actors from a variety of different backgrounds that don't necessarily have a stake in making the union look good, like contradicts those previous narratives about, you know, what the union says about itself that we thought was interesting. We talked about like 4 and 6, I think would relate to that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, the power dynamic that you mentioned, and who's a story, who has been able to tell those stories, and how we need to diversify the perspective in the process. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought the phrasing of number 4 was really interesting, specifically like who owns the story and why. I think that's really important, especially for our projects. We were talking about like how we were connecting with the community and interviewing people, and how that is like number 3, make media with people within communities. And I think it's really important that when you're interviewing someone or like using their story within your own project, you need to make sure that it's still kind of their own words and their own story, and that they're the one that's owning it and sharing their information, I guess.
Absolutely. So as we know, historically, especially documentary, has been a very extractive process. People parachuted in different spaces, collected the narrative and the stories, and they're gone. So it's quite important to think about the ownership, the community agreements, and in the last section, I provide a wealth of resources for you that you could look into as a guidance and guideline and examples of the practices that exist in the field. So the next slide is the recommendations for supporting the co-creation processes. What we're doing today together is really almost like a rapid prototyping. So we'll dive into different topics, different resources in a fast pace. But I invite you to take these resources. Each slide and each exercise that we do could be half an hour engagement with your team. The look at the principles that we did, the follow-up is this recommendations. You looked at the gaps, you look at the possibilities. Now, how do you redesign your process in the next stage of your project? Moving from theory to practice, in section 3, I will share my project, A Father's Lullaby, as a co-creation case study. A Father's Lullaby is a multifaceted, immersive media initiative that interrogates racial bias and structural racism in United States criminal justice system. I launched the project in 2016, and the project was incubated through my parallel residency with Mayor's office in Boston and my multi-year research fellowship at MIT Open Documentary Lab. Before diving deeper into the project, I would like to share some graphs and data with you. I invite you to respond in the chat with yes and no to each slide that you see. You know, by now, Many people in the United States are aware of prison industrial complex and mass incarceration as a systemic challenge. However, very few have intimate knowledge of this challenge and might be unaware of the large scale impact of it in the life of individuals. I have tested this again in many different settings, from classroom to workshop and exhibitions. So what I'm looking for is the specific knowledge that you have. Each data, I want you to respond again with yes and no. If you have seen this knowledge is yes. If this is your first time that you're encountering it is no. This graph represents the international rate of incarceration with the United States as the leading nation. This means less than 5% of world population is in the United States, but 20% of world's incarcerated peoples are right here. This next graph visualizes this data. This is trends of incarceration in the United States from 1925 to 2015. How many of you are aware of this? So we have in the chat never, no, no. So it's pretty much all no responses. Looking at this graph, you will see that from 1978 and 80s to 1998, there is a steep rise in the population in prison system. I want you to respond in the chat, why do you think that is? I see there are a lot of war on drugs. So if there was the element of war on drug, what has changed? If you could put that in the chat, please. So we have in the chat Ronald Reagan presidency, mandatory minimum sentences. So these changes have been happening based on the changes in policies and laws. And as citizens in a democratic society, we enable these changes with our votes. We are an active part of this decision making, even when we are silent or even if we are not voting. And the manifestations of these laws and policies present themselves in the lives of citizens. At the beginning of this workshop, we discussed the danger of a single story, the question of power. We reflected on the knowledge and truth and realities. The stories we tell and the stories we are told have profound impact of what we know as truth and our reality, and therefore the decision we make as individuals and as citizens of a nation. And at the voting polls, these truths enables policies, locally, nationally, and internationally. And this has a major ramification and real impact on the lived experiences of individuals, particularly when it comes to marginalized and disenfranchised communities within the same country or beyond. So I want to bring your attention to the next slide, which represents this data within the context of race and gender. This graph shows the lifetime likelihood of imprisonments of US residents born in 2001. As you see, it represents 1 in 3 Black men, 1 in 6 Latino men, comparing to 1 in 16 white men. Also, you look at the disparities in women. So by the FBI standard, 73.5 million in United States had criminal record as of June 30th, this is 2018. With adult population of 249.4 million, that means the FBI considers about 29.9% of adults to have criminal record. That's almost 1 out of every 3 American, and this is regardless of race and gender. So how many of you were aware of this data? Not at all? No? No? So none of you knew about this. So tell me, how many of you were aware of the issue of mass incarceration? Yes and no. So we have in the chat, yes, 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 yes. So there is a lot of yes. Everybody knew about the issue of mass incarceration. So all of you knew about the issue of mass incarceration, but none of you knew anything about these specific facts. And I'm wondering how it makes you feel. Now that you have more nuanced, more intimate, and more diverse knowledge, and basically more complex story about this issue. You know, a specificity matters to be able to move beyond a single story, because that is, again, like shaping our reality, our truths, the way that we interact with our world, the way that we make policies and approve policies within one nation and also across nations. So this was my preliminary research when I started A Father's Lullaby project. So A Father's Lullaby highlights the nurturing role of men in raising children and makes visible the negative impacts of their long-term sentencing on children, women, and lower-income communities. A Father's Lullaby materializes in multifaceted series of public engagements, including immersive installations, haptic storytelling, community workshop, and a pioneering extended reality documentary co-creation pedagogy at Emerson College. In the past 7 years, one of my main goals has been to manifest this theory of change of art as ecosystem through A Father's Lullaby. A Father's Lullaby utilizes poetic aesthetic and oral histories and move across multiple platforms, engaging people from a spectrum of experiences, from formerly incarcerated fathers to fathers who are judges or federal probation officers. This process builds new social structures to make visible unconventional form of solidarity and criticality across differences. Intimate interviews, songs, and lullabies offer poetic meditation on the space of love, trauma, presence, and absence, and the power of personal memories to cross-examine the structural violence of mass incarceration. Stories and lived experiences of impacted communities acknowledge the current gap and challenges our society is facing today and amplify the collective will to create a structural shift needed for inclusive futures centered on justice, equity, and equality. So this graph represents the type of engagements that I created during the 9 months residency with the mayor's office, and in a way represents the form of communities that we build and the way that the project emerged from all of these interactions and engagements. So I'll take you through some of them briefly so you get a sense. I use pedagogy and educational programs along the way. So I was housed in a community center in South End in Boston, and the community center was serving a multi-generational population, especially a big group of students that they were coming after school. So looking at the needs and wants of that group of population, I saw the 3 different media art programs. All of them was focused on citizen journalism, storytelling, and giving them skills to connect with each other, to connect with their community, but also it was a tool for us to look into what are some of the challenges that the community is dealing with. So we applied for funding to get tools and cameras. This was with the idea that how the creative process could be generative. You don't need to be a professional. As you're learning and as you're gaining skills, you can share that skill. So this group of older students, as they were learning to work with the tools and with the storytelling methods, they were coming and they were mentoring the younger students in different groups. This was collective memory. So I created a series of talks, different artist collaboration. Also, there were many different academic institutions involved, particularly Emmanuel College. There was one course that they were engaged with the Father's Lullaby for the entire semester. These are some of the workshops that the students in that class created at the center. Other form of engagements was one-on-one. The community center was surrounded by different lower income housing projects. There was a series of sound walk that it was GPS tracking, conversations with different community members, also mothers and sons, that there are a series of mini documentaries. These are a few image capture from those. So I was looking at the experiences of mothers raising Black and brown sons in the community. So there are a series of photos and also mini documentary projects. I also define my practice as a poetic cyber movement for social justice, where art mobilizes a plethora of voices by creating connections between public places and virtual spaces. My effort in the past years have been centered on hyperlocal and physical installation, and each installation engage the local communities in a series of public participatory events. As an example, for a Father's Lullaby project initiative, we had 9 larger scale installations since 2017. I'll go through some of those installations with an example for you to see. This was the Ars Electronica Festival, where the project won the award of distinction in music and sound art. This was a large scale installation, 5-channel video and 9-channel audio with these 3 touch panels. And the touch panels are the intimate narrative and the stories of the father. The experience itself is about 26 minutes in 5 movements. So this is another image of the same installation, also at Ars Electronica. This is showing you an example of how I also data visualize in my project, referencing some of those data. So I'll play this short excerpt. It's only 2 channels here.
My mother was my mother was my mother. Entonces la nena se alegrará en la danza, los jóvenes y viejos juntamente. Cambiaré su llanto en gozo, los consolaré, los alegraré, alegraré en su dolor.
This exhibition was at the Institute of Contemporary Art. It is a 3-channel installation with 5-channel audio and a 26-minute experience. I use a variety of different mediums, from a stop-motion animation to volumetric filmmaking, and each one of these media are very intentionally used in the process. The touch panels are actually the heart of the project. So wherever the project goes is a call to the community. I engage through participatory projects and workshop, also technology workshops with the immediate community. And the immediate community is invited to record lullabies and share their memories and stories of their own childhood or of their childhood of their children. But also I work closely with formerly incarcerated fathers, fathers who have been released from federal prison after 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. And those stories are the one that they are actually on these touch panels. The only way that you can interact with the father's narrative and know that this is a story of incarcerated father is when you sit down and intentionally engage with that layer of the project. So when you enter the experience, it's a 26-minute experience in 5 movement, is very poetic, is ritualistic, and it's based on the memories and lullabies collected from all community members. So when you come in, you don't know who's incarcerated father and who's not. There is also mothers and women's narrative and a story where you can actually hear the voice of formerly incarcerated fathers telling the story of their childhood, of their children, is these beautiful intimate moments that you would encounter. I call these deep witnessing. So these are panels that once you touch them, it activates the stories. And as long as you hold your touch, you can hear the story of the fathers. Each panel represents one father's story. This is at ICA. This is another section when you have mothers. So I'm going to show you a short excerpt. It's about 3 minutes. It's from different segment of the piece. You don't get the sense of the narration, but you get a feeling of the texture and the audio. So I will play this for you.
Brown-skinned girl, stay home and mind, baby. I'm going away on a sailing boat, and if I don't come back, stay home and mind, baby.
She's standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be.
Well, when I first got sentenced, I was sentenced to 360 months, which is 30 years. My 28-year-old son now, he was 7 years old. And the twins, they were 45 days old. Now, I've just been released a few months ago. They're 21 now.
Like something dissolves in water. Like something dissolves in water. Dissolves in water. Place where their lullabies like transcend, dissolves in rattling bones, and urban side thing dissolves in water.
When I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. Sometimes he winds up knocking me back on my knees. Well, there have been times when I thought I couldn't last for long, but somehow I'm able to carry on. It's been a long, long time coming.
Beneath a load of guilt and shame, shackled by a heavy burden,
where their music transcends
beneath
rattling bones
a
and
load
earth
of guilt
silence.
and shame.
For those blessed mothers,
This exhibition was at Concourse Center for the Visual Arts in 2021, is in conjunction with the work from three other artists, all of their projects in dialogue. The way that this project was set up is a 3-channel flat screen installation and 6-channel audio envelop the entire room. This is an audio installation. This was a participatory interactive public sound installation in Open Spirit in Framingham. Different ways of prototyping the work that it could exist at the public site and engage with the public audience in a way that you don't know whether it's art or not, and there is a beautiful encounter happening there. There is a composition made from the lullabies that it's on this level, and on these benches where people are sitting down, there are motion activated sensors that activates the father's story. So there is also that sort of multi-layering of the experiences happening there. This was at Boston Center for the Arts. It was the entire block, so you would pass by. There were multiple stations that you would hear the lullabies and audios, and if you were becoming interested and come closer to the source of the audio, the lullabies, then the motion sensor were activated for you to hear the intimate narrative and the stories of the fathers. This is another form of taking the project to the public site. This was at Hubwik in 2018 at a conference called We the Future. It's a shipping container that has the multi-layer aspect of it. Also, always there is a participatory component. We have a geolocated augmented audio soundscape that you can scan the QR code or get on these stations that they are available and connect to a web page to record your own voice, and your voice becomes part of this landscape. I want to come back to this creating alternative communities for future imagination. One of the ways that I have been able to fully, in a long term, enable the co-creation process is through my pedagogy. So at Emerson College, I started this course that we finished the 5th semester. It brings together formerly incarcerated fathers, probation officers, and students from 3 different departments for the entire semester. And they work together, learning to work with emerging media technology, 360 cameras, audio recording, VR headsets, and the fathers work with their children throughout the process, and they are enabled to use the tools as a way of processing their narrative and the story. So this initiative is a partnership with Federal Probation's Nurturing Fathers program. So that aspect of trauma-informed action is happening outside of the classroom and inside of the classroom. The fathers who are joining the course, they are all also participating in this Nurturing Fathers program as a group. Students collaborate with formerly incarcerated fathers, probation officers, and their children to tell their stories using virtual reality, augmented reality, and 360 filmmaking. So the students and fathers learning is situated at this triangle. Learning about emerging media, working with social justice challenge, and working through community co-creation. And I want to bring back again that concept of co-creation and the processes of co-creation with these very important questions, that co-creation must reframe the ethic of who creates, why, and how, and also co-creation interprets the world and seek to change it through the lens of equity and justice, and how the projects emerge from the process, evolves from within the communities, with people, rather than being made for and about them. These are some of the photo documentation from the engagement. This was the first semester when we were all able to meet in person. The fathers are experiencing for the first time virtual reality. They're watching Traveling While Black. The workshops were run by students, and there are probation officers and fathers in the classroom. But then COVID happened in the middle of the semester, and we were transported to online. So we had to shift to tools and technology that fathers had access and students had access to. So we shifted to creating AR stories. There was a series of AR postcards created by students and fathers. Each team was centering their projects around one father's story. The following semester, we were able to create an actually emerging media lab at the Federal Probation Office, where fathers were able to check out equipment and take it home. And it was a hybrid program for 3 semesters, where fathers were at home and the students were in the classroom, because we couldn't bring the fathers back due to the COVID restrictions. So fathers were filming their own stories, recording their own audios, and they were working with the students through the post-production process. So the next semester, there was a series of 360 videos created, and we were able to finally, last spring, bring fathers into the on campus again, and we use volumetric filmmaking to create VR projects together. So these are some of the examples of that. So they do scanning and 3D model. I'll show you some of the scans. This is one of the fathers that took the laptop and scanned their barber shop. That's where he works with his father. So here's a closing thought from Collective Wisdom. I only read a section of it. Making can divide, alienate, and exploit, or it has the potential to be inclusive, equitable, and respectful. The latter conditions are far more conducive to the collective efforts it will take to address the immense challenges of a structural inequity. In reaching beyond the mere sum of our collective intelligence, we stand the chance of finding our collective wisdom. Co-creation offers hope. Now we shift to hands-on activity, where you will map out your project's ecosystem. This is an opportunity for you to bring these critical concepts and questions into your practice and redesign your process using your current project as a case study. As I mentioned before, co-creation process is iterative. You need ongoing collective reflective moments that opens room for discovery and insight to inform the next stage of your process. We talked about a story, the danger of single story, and the power of multiplicity of narrative and stories. What I invite you to do in the next phase, I'll share a mirror board with you in a second. I want you to think about proximity of your project and start with the most intimate relationships. Who is at the heart of your project? What is their knowledge? what is their power. The goal of this hands-on exercise is to map out the ecosystem of the relationships, identify their power and their knowledge, and based on that, think about how you can redesign your processes. How does your process interrupt the traditional power dynamics? How your process recognizes the unconventional form of knowledge as expertise. What redesign is needed to move you a step closer to embodying equity and justice? I'm going to give you an example when you're mapping out your ecosystem for considering relationships, connections, and stakeholders. For example, you think about people who are project leads, who are community co-creators, partners, participants, influencers, or audience. Use the 10 co-creation principles as your guiding light. Remember, this process is reflective, iterative, and you can use these reflective moments and tools in different stage of your project. We will have about 15 minutes in the breakout room, and I will come around and talk to each group individually. Enjoy your time. Welcome back, everyone. This is a very useful exercise, so I hope you enjoyed it and you will continue working on this. Section 5 is lessons from the fields, also examples of community agreements and some amazing resources, additional resources. I am not going to dive deep into each section. This is definitely for you to come back to, and whether as your team or individually to go through and review them. This is the lessons from the field. What I want to acknowledge is that in the co-creation process, you must be doing a lot of unlearning, especially when people are trained within the traditional media production. If you take this first example, deep listening and dialogue, this is crucial in the co-creation process. I ask my students not to consider interview process at all. We spend a major amount of time on deep listening, understanding what is that and how we go through that process as a way of community building, and allowing for the stories and narratives and the important concept emerges from that deep listening space and deep listening place rather than interview process. I will mention a few of these. Begin with deep listening, fostering dialogue and learning rather than coming in with preset agenda. Identifying common principles and negotiating terms and benefit agreements on individual, organizational, and community level, and spelling these out, any form of decision-making, ownership, and governance issues beforehand to ensure equity and inclusion. Foster diverse alternative forms of narrative structure. Co-creators can shed linear, conventional format and embrace non-linear, open-ended, ongoing, and multivocal and circular spiral narrative forms. Center healing, safety, and sustainability by employing trauma-informed practices. So I'll just let you go through those. For authorship and community benefit agreement, there are multiple examples in the field report. One that I brought here for you is a memorandum of understanding between Detroit Narrative Agency and Co-Creation Studio at MIT Open Documentary Lab when they were writing this report, actually. I am not going to read it, but it's available for you to dive deeper as an example. I want to mention 3 main resources for you to look into further. One is the Design Justice book by Sasha Costanza-Chalk. This book is also available online and in the form of book. Design justice rethink design processes, centers people who are normally marginalized by design, and uses collaborative creative practice to address the deepest challenge our community faces. In the design justice, there is also 10 principles that they would be very useful for you to look into. I'm not going to read through them again. There are similarities and differences. What I encourage you to do is look at all of these resources and create a 10 principle for yourself and for your project, things that they are most meaningful for you and your community members. The other book that I recommend is Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein. Data feminism offers strategies for data scientists seeking to learn how feminism can help them work toward justice. I'll say I quote another section. Data science is a form of power. The narratives around big data and data science are overwhelmingly white, male, and techno-heroic. Data feminism presents a new way of thinking about data science and data ethics, one that is informed by intersectional feminist thoughts. Data feminism offers strategies for data scientists seeking to learn how feminism can help them work toward justice. Data feminism also have put a set of principles and guidelines. I briefly overview them. We insist on intersectionality, we advocate for equity, we prioritize proximity, we acknowledge the humanity of data, we are reflexive, transparent, and accountable. And the last resource is Making a New Reality Toolkit that provides resources for more inclusive emerging media. This is by Kamal Sinclair and Jessica Clark. I highly recommend for those of you who are interested in emerging media particularly to look at this resource. They also have an amazing online resources. So thank you everyone. I really appreciate your participation. Consider these resources as tools that you can adapt and reframe and use in the ways that they are most meaningful and ethical to you, your community, and your projects. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. There was a lot of information, and I invite you to dive deeper on your own pace. Thank you, Professor Nasiri, for creating this critical space. Bye, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much again. If you're watching the recording of this later, this recording is accompanied by materials that will make the recording more useful for especially the people who did not participate in the live workshop. Thank you again, Rasheen, for your great workshop and presentation. I think we all learned a lot. Thank you so much.